I am Clarissa, 68 years old now. My son David disappeared when he was 25, vanishing without a trace one spring morning. For 3 decades, I lived in a peculiar limbo between hope and grief in our quiet Connecticut suburb. I kept his room intact, celebrated his birthdays alone, and jumped at every phone call. Then last night, I turned on the evening news and saw a face I would recognize anywhere. My David, 30 years older, staring back at me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Before I tell you what happened when I saw my son's face on TV after 3 decades, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button. If you've ever wondered what happened to someone who vanished from your life. Life in the early 90s was different. No smartphones, no social media, just simpler times in our peaceful Connecticut neighborhood. I was a single mother, raising David on my own after his father left when he was just 4 years old. The divorce was painful, but it made the bond between David and me unbreakable. At least that's what I always believed. I taught English at Westbrook High School, pouring my love for literature into generations of teenagers, while making sure David had everything he needed. My salary wasn't extravagant, but we managed well enough in our modest two-bedroom house with the blue shutters. Every spare dollar went toward David's college fund. David was brilliant from the start. Even as a little boy, he could take apart and reassemble electronics with an intuitive understanding that amazed everyone. When computers began appearing in homes, he was fascinated. He would spend hours learning programming languages, often forgetting to eat until I called him 3 times for dinner. "Mom, computers are going to change everything," he would say, eyes bright with excitement. "The internet is going to connect the world in ways we can't even imagine yet." He graduated top of his class from MIT with a degree in computer science in 1991. I sat in that audience bursting with pride watching my son in his cap and gown. He was tall and lanky like his father, with my hazel eyes and determined chin. That day I felt like all the sacrifices, all the parent-teacher conferences I'd rushed to after teaching my own classes all the nights helping with science fair projects had been worth it. After graduation, David was recruited by a startup called Digital Frontier. They were developing early encryption software, and David was thrilled to be part of something so cutting edge. He moved into an apartment about 20 minutes from my house, and despite his busy schedule, we maintained our Sunday dinner tradition. Those Sunday dinners were sacred. David would arrive around 4, always with a small gift. Nothing expensive. A book he thought I'd enjoy, flowers from the farmer's market, or a pastry from that bakery I loved. We would cook together, him chopping vegetables while I prepared the main course, discussing everything from books to politics. "The new John Grisham book is perfect for you, Mom," he said during one of our last dinners, handing me a hardcover copy of The Firm. "It's about a young lawyer who discovers his firm is involved in something sinister." "Are you trying to tell me something about your job?" I joked, accepting the book. His smile faltered slightly. "No, of course not. Just thought you'd like the mystery." David had been dating Sophia for nearly 2 years by then. She was lovely, a pediatric nurse with a warm laugh who clearly adored my son. She joined us for dinner every few weeks, and I had started to hope wedding bells might be in their future. David had confided that he was saving for a ring. "I want to do it right, Mom," he told me over coffee one morning. "Sophia deserves something special." But looking back, I realized things began to change about 2 months before he disappeared. David started receiving strange phone calls that would make him step outside to continue the conversation. He began checking over his shoulder when we were out together, and once I caught him closing his laptop quickly when I entered his apartment unannounced. "Is everything okay at work?" I asked him. "Just some intense projects," he would say, forcing a smile. "Nothing to worry about." One night, about 3 weeks before he vanished, David came for dinner alone. Sophia was working a night shift. He seemed distracted, barely touching his food, and kept glancing at his watch. "David, what's going on?" I finally asked, setting down my fork. "And don't tell me it's nothing." He sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. I'm working on something important, Mom. Something that could change things. At Digital Frontier. Sort of. He hesitated. I've discovered something. In the encryption software, something I don't think was supposed to be there. What do you mean? Ah, I can't explain everything yet. It's complicated, and he lowered his voice. Potentially dangerous, but I'm gathering evidence. I'll explain everything soon, I promise. I should have pressed harder, should have demanded answers right then. But I respected his privacy, his independence. I thought we had time. The last normal morning we shared was Tuesday, April 17th, 1993. David had stayed overnight at my place after working late on his laptop at my dining room table. He had bags under his eyes, but seemed more relaxed than he had in weeks. I think I figured it out, he said, pouring coffee. I just need to double-check a few things at work today. Figured what out? He smiled mysteriously. Let me confirm first, then I'll tell you everything. We should celebrate tonight. Invite Sophia over. Of course. I agreed, watching him gulp down his coffee. 7 o'clock. Perfect. He kissed my cheek, grabbed his jacket and briefcase, and headed for the door. Love you, Mom. Love you too, sweetheart. Those were the last words we exchanged. By nightfall, my world would be shattered, and 30 years of searching would begin. The first sign something was wrong came at 11:30 that morning. I was teaching Romeo and Juliet to my 10th grade class when the school secretary knocked on my classroom door. Mrs. Johnson, there's a phone call for you. They say it's urgent. In the office, I picked up the receiver, expecting perhaps a doctor's office, or maybe even David calling to change our dinner plans. Hello, is this Clarissa Johnson? A woman's voice asked. Yes, this is she. This is Margaret from Digital Frontier. I'm trying to reach David. He had an important meeting this morning that he missed, and he's not answering his phone or pager. Is he with you? A tiny flicker of unease lit in my stomach. No, he left for work around 7:30 this morning. He hasn't arrived. No, and it's very unlike him. The meeting was with our lead investor. It's quite serious that he missed it. I made excuses for the rest of my classes and drove straight to David's apartment. Using the spare key he'd given me, I let myself in, calling his name, even though I somehow already knew he wouldn't answer. The apartment looked normal. Too normal. Bed-made dishes washed everything in its place. The only thing missing was his laptop and the file folders he usually kept beside it. His toothbrush was still in the bathroom. Clothes still hung in the closet. His wallet wasn't there, but his passport was still in the desk drawer, where he kept important documents. I called Sophia at the hospital. Have you heard from David today? No? She said, concern immediately evident in her voice. Not since last night. He texted me about dinner at your place tonight. Why? What's happened? By 4 o'clock, with no word from David, I called the police. They sent an officer named Walters, who seemed bored by the whole situation. Ma'am, your son is 25 years old. He explained slowly, as if I were a child. Adults go off the grid all the time. Maybe he needed space. You don't understand, I insisted. David wouldn't miss work. He wouldn't miss our dinner plans. Something is wrong. Officer Walters sighed. Has he been depressed? Any drug problems? Gambling debts? Absolutely not. I was offended by the very suggestion. David is responsible and dedicated. He's working on important projects. He was excited about dinner tonight. Well, we can take a missing persons report, but honestly, he hasn't been gone long enough for us to do much. Most adults who disappear do so voluntarily. I felt helpless as I filled out forms providing David's description, his habits, his friends. When I mentioned the strange calls and his secretive behavior, Officer Walters perked up slightly. Could be drug-related, he suggested, or maybe he was involved in something illegal. My son is not a criminal, I snapped. The next morning, Sophia called me in tears. The bank just called David about unusual activity on his account. He withdrew $5,000 in cash yesterday morning before going to work. My blood ran cold. That wasn't a spontaneous decision. That was planned. When I told the police, their interest in David's disappearance actually decreased. See, he planned to leave. Probably wanted to start fresh somewhere. Happens all the time. But I knew my son. Something was terribly wrong. I placed ads in newspapers, printed hundreds of flyers with David's photo, and called everyone he knew. His colleagues at Digital Frontier seemed genuinely confused, though I sensed they weren't telling me everything about his projects. David was working on standard encryption protocols. His supervisor, Marcus, told me stiffly. Nothing unusual. But Sophia revealed something different. He mentioned something about a backdoor in the system. He was worried about it, but wouldn't explain more. Said it was better if I didn't know details. With the police being unhelpful, I scraped together $3,000 to hire Jack Murray, a private investigator with a reputation for finding people. Murray was a former detective, gruff but thorough, and the first person who took me seriously. $5,000 in cash means he was either running from something or needed to pay someone off, Murray said during our first meeting. Let's check bus stations, train stations, and airports. 2 days later, Murray found security footage from the downtown bus station. There was David carrying his laptop bag and a small duffel boarding a bus to New York City at 9:15 a.m. on the day he disappeared. He kept looking over his shoulder, clearly afraid. He's running from someone, Murray confirmed. The question is who and why. That grainy image of my son boarding a bus would be the last confirmed sighting of David for 30 years. The next several years passed in a blur of desperate searching, false hopes, and gradual despair. My dining room became command central, with maps, timelines, and contact information covering every surface. Photos of David were pinned everywhere, his smiling face watching, as I made hundreds of calls and followed countless leads. I took a leave of absence from teaching, certain that David would be found within months. The school principal, Alan Simmons, was initially supportive. "Take the time you need, Clarissa," he assured me. "Your position will be waiting." But as months stretched into a year, his tone changed. "The substitute needs to know if she's staying permanently," he said during an uncomfortable phone call. "The students need consistency." "I can't think about that right now," I replied. "Finding David is all that matters." "Clarissa," Alan's voice softened with pity that made me flinch. "It's been 13 months. Have you considered that David might not want to be found?" I hung up on him and cried for hours. 2 weeks later, I received a letter informing me that due to extended absence, my contract would not be renewed for the following year. 20 years of teaching gone. But I couldn't bring myself to care. Jack Murray followed David's trail to New York, but hit a wall there. The bus arrived at Port Authority, and security cameras showed David exiting, still clutching his bags, still looking frightened. Then he disappeared into the crowd. "He might have taken another bus," Murray suggested, "or a train. Could have gone anywhere from New York. Could have even left the country with a fake ID." Murray checked hotels, hostels, apartment rentals. He interviewed taxi drivers and showed David's photo at every bus and train station within a 100-mile radius. Nothing. "Someone's helping him hide," Murray concluded after 6 months. Or, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We both knew the alternative was that someone had made sure David would never be found. I joined a support group for families of missing persons. We met in a church basement every Thursday, sharing stories, leads, and the unique pain of ambiguous loss. Some members had closure, eventually, usually the worst kind. Others, like me, existed in limbo year after year. "Not knowing is its own special hell," said Brenda, whose daughter had vanished during a spring break trip. "You can't grieve properly, can't move on, can't do anything but wait." Sophia tried to stay involved in the search for the first year. She helped distribute flyers, attended vigils, and called regularly to check for updates. But I could see the toll it was taking on her. She was young, just 24, with her whole life ahead of her. 2 years after David disappeared, She came to my house with a small box of his things she had kept at her apartment. "I've been offered a position at a children's hospital in Chicago," she said softly, eyes downcast. "I think I need to take it." I wanted to scream at her for giving up, for abandoning David, but the rational part of me knew that wasn't fair. "You should go," I said instead, my voice hollow. "I'll always love him," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But I can't live in this pause forever. I need to find out what the rest of my life looks like." I nodded, stiffly accepting the box. After she left, I sat on the floor and sobbed, clutching one of David's old sweatshirts that still smelled faintly of his cologne. It felt like losing him all over again. As years passed, other relationships faded too. Friends stopped calling, tired of conversations that always circled back to David. Family members suggested therapy, as if I were the one with the problem. My sister Beth was the most direct. "This obsession isn't healthy," she told me during a tense Thanksgiving dinner 5 years after the disappearance. "You've lost your job, your friends, and you're draining your savings on private investigators who find nothing." "What would you have me do?" I asked bitterly. "Pretend my son is dead, have a funeral for an empty casket. Maybe that would be healthier than this shrine you're living in." She gestured around my house, where David's photos and missing person posters covered nearly every wall. We didn't speak for 2 years after that conversation. The financial strain grew unbearable. I had depleted my savings and was subsisting on substitute teaching jobs. Murray had long since exhausted all leads but still checked in occasionally. "Sometimes cases break open years later," he assured me. "People talk. Relationships change. Someone who was afraid to come forward before might change their mind." On the 10th anniversary of David's disappearance, a local news station did a feature story. I spoke on camera, showing the interviewer David's room preserved exactly as he left it, dusty textbooks still stacked on his desk. "Someone out there knows something," I pleaded to the camera. "Please, if you have any information about David Johnson, come forward. I just need to know what happened to my son." The segment generated a flurry of calls, most from well-meaning people with nothing substantial to offer. A few claimed to have seen David in various cities across the country. Murray followed up on every lead, but none panned out. The brief hope the coverage provided faded, leaving me more exhausted than before. 15 years into my search, I received the most credible lead yet. A man named Travis contacted Murray, claiming he had worked with David at a small tech company in Seattle around 2001. He called himself Daniel Jackson. Travis explained, "But I recognize the face from your flyers. He was paranoid, always looking over his shoulder. Brilliant programmer though, disappeared again after about 6 months." Murray flew to Seattle immediately. He found employment records for a Daniel Jackson matching David's general description, but the social security number belonged to a child who died in 1963. The company had closed years ago, and the owner couldn't be located. The apartment Daniel Jackson had rented showed no traces of its former occupant. Another dead end that left me physically ill from disappointment. The day I finally broke was April 17, 2008, 15 years to the day since David vanished. I had maintained my ritual of sitting by the phone all day on the anniversary, just in case. As midnight approached, with no call, something inside me shattered. I collapsed on the kitchen floor, hyperventilating, chest burning with pain so intense I thought I was having a heart attack. My neighbor found me the next morning, still curled in a fetal position on the cold tiles. The doctor at the emergency room diagnosed a severe panic attack and recommended psychiatric evaluation. "Your body can't sustain this level of stress indefinitely," he warned. "You're destroying yourself." For the first time, I admitted I needed help. The therapist, Dr. Lydia Winters, didn't try to make me give up hope. Instead, she helped me find ways to honor David's memory while reclaiming parts of my life. "You need an identity beyond being the mother of a missing son," she said gently during one session. "What else matters to you, Clarissa?" It was a startlingly simple question that I couldn't immediately answer. Who was I beyond my grief and searching? Slowly, painfully, I began rebuilding. I returned to teaching part-time at a different school, working with adults in a night program. My students were immigrants learning English, people reinventing themselves in a new country. Their determination inspired me. With Dr. Winter's encouragement, I also started a support organization for families of missing adults, filling a gap in the system. While children who disappeared received significant attention and resources, adults who vanished were often dismissed as having chosen to leave. Missing Adults Matter began as a monthly meeting in my living room with 3 other families. Within 2 years, we had chapters in 12 states and had helped secure better police responses and media coverage for dozens of cases. This work gave purpose to my pain. On David's birthday each year, I maintained a private ritual. I would drive to Lake Windermere, where we had spent summer afternoons when he was a boy, and release paper lanterns at sunset. One for each year he had been gone. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I would whisper as the lanterns floated skyward. "Wherever you are, I hope you're safe." After 20 years, I finally converted David's bedroom into a small office for the organization. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, feeling like a betrayal. I kept his most precious possessions: his high school science awards, the MIT diploma, the worn copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy he'd read until the spine cracked. Everything else went into labeled storage boxes in the attic. My neighbor Roger asked me to dinner around that time. He was a kind widower who had always been friendly, helping with yard work and checking in during bad weather. "Just as friends," he clarified, clearly nervous. "But friends who eat food together somewhere that isn't one of our houses." I surprised myself by accepting. The evening was pleasant, the conversation refreshingly focused on books and current events rather than my missing son. Roger didn't push for more than friendship, which was good, because I discovered I wasn't capable of true intimacy. A wall had formed around my heart, impenetrable even to my own attempts to dismantle it. After 23 years, Sophia reached out again. She had found me through the Missing Adults Matter website. "I've thought about David so often over the years," she said when we met for coffee. She was in her late 40s now, with laugh lines around her eyes and a calm confidence. "I have 3 children now. My oldest son just started college." There was an awkward moment when we both realized her life had continued in all the ways mine had frozen. But there was no resentment anymore, just a shared fondness for the boy we had both loved. "I named my son David," she admitted softly. "I hope that's okay." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, throat too tight for words. In the following years, I achieved a kind of peace, not resignation exactly. I never stopped believing David was out there somewhere. But I had created a life that could accommodate both my ongoing search and my need to live in the present. I wrote a book about families of the missing that received modest attention and helped other families navigate the complex emotional and practical challenges of their situations. I retired from teaching at 65, but continued running Missing Adults Matter. And then came the evening that changed everything again. October 12, 2023 started as an ordinary Thursday. I made tea, answered emails from families seeking help, and worked on a grant proposal for our organization. After dinner, I settled into my recliner to watch the evening news, a habit I maintained partly because I still scanned every crowd scene and human interest story for David's face. The lead story was about a major technology scandal. I was half listening, my attention divided between the TV and the crossword puzzle in my lap. Breaking news tonight, as whistleblower Thomas Harwell prepares to testify before Congress about an illegal government surveillance program dating back decades, the anchor announced. I glanced up as they showed footage of a man walking into a federal building surrounded by security. He was in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and glasses. Something about the set of his shoulders made my hand freeze on the crossword. The camera caught his face as he turned to speak to someone beside him, and the pen dropped from my fingers. Oh my God, I whispered, rising slowly from my chair. David. My legs gave way and I sank back down, heart thundering in my chest. The man on screen, the shape of his jaw, the way his eyebrows drew together when he concentrated. The small scar near his hairline from falling off his bike at 12. It was my son. 30 years older but unmistakably David. I fumbled for the remote with shaking hands, rewinding the digital broadcast and pausing on the clearest image of his face. I took a photo with my phone, hands trembling so badly I had to try 3 times. The segment continued, explaining that Thomas Harwell was a cybersecurity expert who claimed to have evidence that a surveillance program codenamed Watchful Eye had been illegally monitoring American citizens since the early 90s. Harwell will testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the reporter explained. Sources say his testimony could implicate several major technology companies and former high-ranking intelligence officials. I called Jack Murray immediately, not caring that it was after 10 p.m. Murray was 70 now, long retired, but he had never stopped checking in every few months. Jack, turn on Channel 8 right now, I said, when he answered, my voice hardly recognizable even to myself. Clarissa, what's happened? Just do it. Tell me if the man they're calling Thomas Harwell is David. I heard shuffling, then silence, as he presumably found the channel. After what felt like an eternity, he spoke, voice stunned. Holy shit, it's him. Older, but it's definitely him. I burst into tears, decades of emotion overwhelming me. Relief, confusion, anger, joy, all colliding at once. I need to get to Washington, I said, already mentally packing a bag. His hearing is tomorrow morning. Clarissa, wait, Murray cautioned. If he's been living under another name all this time, there's a reason. This whistleblower business is serious. There could be danger. I don't care. I've waited 30 years. I'm not waiting another day. I spent the night researching everything I could find about Thomas Harwell. There wasn't much. He had apparently worked as a cybersecurity consultant for various companies over the years. He had published academic papers on encryption and digital privacy. No personal details were available. No photos except those taken at professional conferences, and even those were scarce. Murray used his old contacts to run a facial recognition comparison between David's missing person photo and the TV footage of Thomas Harwell. 89% match, he confirmed by phone as I was boarding an early train to Washington. It's him, Clarissa. After all this time, we've found him. The train ride was surreal. As the landscape rushed past, memories flooded back. David's first day of kindergarten, teaching him to ride a bike. His high school graduation. The last time I saw him, coffee mug in hand, promising to explain everything soon. What explanation could possibly justify 30 years of silence? I arrived in Washington 2 hours before the hearing was scheduled to begin. The line to enter the Senate building already stretched around the block, media outlets and curious citizens hoping to witness what was being called a historic testimony. I didn't have a guaranteed seat, but I showed a security guard the photo of David and explained that Thomas Harwell was my long-missing son. Whether he believed me or just pitied the desperate older woman, he let me in through a side entrance and found me a seat near the back of the chamber. The room buzzed with anticipation. Senators filed in, aides whispered to each other, cameras were positioned. And then there he was, entering from a side door with his legal team. David. My David. He looked tired, with deep lines around his eyes and mouth that spoke of years of stress. His hair, once rich brown like mine, was more grey than not. He wore a simple navy suit and moved with the careful deliberation of a man who knew he was being watched. I pressed my hand against my mouth to hold back a sob. How many times had I imagined this moment, finding him injured in a hospital, meeting him by chance on a street corner, receiving a call that his remains had been found. Never had I imagined him walking confidently into a Senate hearing as a different person entirely. The hearing was formally opened. David, or Thomas, as they called him, was sworn in. His voice, deeper with age, but still recognizably, his echoed through the chamber as he promised to tell the truth. For the next 2 hours, I listened as my son explained how in 1993, as a young programmer at Digital Frontier, he had discovered that the encryption software they were developing contained secret backdoors, allowing government access to supposedly secure communications. When I brought my concerns to management, I was told to forget what I had seen. He testified. When I persisted, I began receiving threats, not just against me, but against my family. My breath caught. He had been protecting me. I gathered evidence of the program, which I now know was called Watchful Eye, and planned to take it to a journalist, he continued. But before I could, I was approached by agents who made it clear I had two options: disappear into federal witness protection or face prosecution for theft of classified information. They made it clear that if I chose the latter, my family would also face consequences for my actions. Tears streamed down my face as the pieces fell into place. The cash withdrawal, the secretive behavior, the bus to New York. I chose to protect my family, David said, voice breaking slightly. I entered witness protection with the understanding that I would remain silent about what I knew. For 30 years, I honored that agreement, believing the program had been shut down as I was told it would be. 2 months ago, I discovered it not only continued but expanded. I could no longer stay silent. When the senators began their questioning, I slipped out of my seat and made my way toward the front of the chamber. A security guard tried to stop me, but I was beyond caring about protocol. David, I called out, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. His head snapped up, eyes scanning the crowd until they locked with mine. 3 decades fell away in that moment. Recognition, shock, and what looked like fear flashed across his face. Mom, he whispered, the microphone capturing the word and broadcasting it through the chamber. The room erupted in confused murmurs. The committee chairman banged his gavel, calling for order. Security personnel moved toward me, but David stood up. Wait, he said urgently. Please, that's my mother. The hearing was abruptly recessed. I was escorted to a private room where I waited, heart-pounding, for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When the door opened, David stood there, flanked by 2 serious-looking men in suits, who I assumed were federal marshals. He dismissed them with a quiet word, and then we were alone. For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of 30 years of separation hanging between us. You found me, he finally said, voice thick with emotion. I never stopped looking, I replied. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms. I sobbed against his chest, clutching his suit jacket as if he might disappear again if I let go. I'm sorry, he whispered against my hair, his own tears falling. I'm so sorry, Mom. I thought I was protecting you. They told me they would ruin your life, put you in danger. I couldn't risk it. 30 years, I said, pulling back to look at his face, memorizing every new line, every change. 30 years without a word, David. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Pain flashed across his features. I wanted to contact you so many times, but they monitored me constantly at first. Later, I was afraid any contact would put us both at risk. And then so much time had passed, and I didn't know how to explain. We talked for hours in that small room, federal marshals standing guard outside. David told me about his life as Thomas Harwell, how the government had created an entirely new identity for him, how he had been relocated multiple times in the early years, how he had eventually built a career as a cybersecurity expert, using his knowledge to help companies protect themselves from the very surveillance he had uncovered. I got married, he said hesitantly, watching my reaction. Her name is Andrea. We have 2 children, twin girls. I have grandchildren, I whispered. They're 22 now, in college. He pulled out his wallet, showing me a photo of 2 beautiful young women with his smile. Emily and Sarah. They don't know about any of this, about who I was before. The revelation was both wonderful and devastating. Grandchildren I had never known existed. A daughter-in-law I had never met. 30 years of birthdays and Christmases and graduations gone forever. Does Andrea know the truth? I asked. Some of it. She knows I was in witness protection, but not all the details. Not about you. I told her my parents were dead. He looked away, ashamed. It was easier than explaining why I could never contact you. Anger flared hot and sudden. Easier for you, maybe. Do you have any idea what my life has been like? Searching for you, never knowing if you were alive or dead. The police thought you'd run off. Friends thought I was obsessed. I lost my job, my savings, years of my life looking for you. David flinched at each accusation but didn't defend himself. You have every right to hate me, he said quietly. What I did was unforgivable. I don't hate you. I said, the fight draining out of me as quickly as it had come. I could never hate you, but I don't know you anymore. You're not the David who left that morning. You're someone else now. Not completely, he said, taking my hand. I never forgot you, never stopped loving you. I kept track of you as much as I could without risking contact. I know about Missing Adults Matter, about the book you wrote. I've been so proud of you, Mom. The thought of him watching from a distance, knowing I was searching and not reaching out, brought a fresh wave of pain. But looking at his face, seeing the genuine remorse and the love still there underneath, I couldn't hold on to my anger. What happens now? I asked. After your testimony, I don't know exactly. There will be investigations, possibly trials. The protection program is arranging new security for me and my family. He hesitated. For you too, if you'll accept it. And after that, will you disappear again? No, he said firmly. Never again. If you want me in your life, I'm here. It's too late for so much, but maybe not for everything. The months that followed were a complicated dance of reconnection, government interference, and painful truths. David's testimony set off a political firestorm. The surveillance program he exposed had violated countless privacy laws and constitutional protections. High-ranking officials from 3 administrations were implicated. Our reunion was not the simple happy ending of fairy tales. My initial joy at finding David alive gave way to complicated grief for the 30 years we had lost. My anger would resurface, unexpectedly triggered by small realizations about all I had missed. The first time I met Andrea was awkward and tense. She was understandably shocked to discover her husband had a mother he had claimed was dead. A mother who knew him by a completely different name. I feel like I don't know who I married, she admitted during our first private conversation. We were sitting in a hotel room secured by federal marshals, picking at room service salads neither of us wanted. I understand, I told her. The David I knew and the Thomas you married seem like different people to me too. Despite the difficult beginning, Andrea showed remarkable compassion. He's a good man, she said, a wonderful father. Whatever his reasons, whatever his past, that much is true. Meeting my granddaughters was both joyous and painful. Emily and Sarah were bright, confident young women who looked at me with curious eyes, trying to fit this unexpected grandmother into their understanding of the world. They had David's intelligence and quick smiles. Dad always got weird about family history projects in school. Emily told me over coffee during our 3rd meeting. Now we know why. The federal marshals, who had been part of David's witness protection, remained involved in our lives, monitoring our interactions and controlling when and how we could meet. I resented their presence, their clipboards and reports, their power to dictate the terms of our reunification. They're just doing their job, David would remind me. They kept me safe all these years. They kept you from me, I would counter. Trust was the hardest thing to rebuild. For 30 years, I had trusted my instincts that David wouldn't have abandoned me willingly. Now that I knew I was right, I still struggled to trust the man he had become. David and I began writing letters when we couldn't meet in person, long detailed accounts of the years we had missed. He told me about his wedding day, about holding his daughters for the first time, about the career accomplishments he had achieved as Thomas. I shared stories about the families I had helped through Missing Adults Matter, about the small victories and ongoing struggles. Gradually, phone calls became part of our routine. Once a week, then twice, then almost daily. Each conversation filled in another piece of the puzzle of our separated lives. 6 months after David's testimony, once the most intense scrutiny had faded, we were allowed a supervised family gathering. David, Andrea, the twins, and me together at a secure location. It was the first time I had seen all of them together, interacting as a family unit that had existed for decades without my knowledge. Watching David with his daughters, seeing the easy affection between them, the inside jokes and familiar patterns, I felt like an intruder. They had built a life that didn't include me, and no amount of goodwill could completely bridge that gap. Yet there were moments of connection too. Sarah had my love for literature and had studied English in college. Emily had David's technical mind and his habit of drumming fingers when thinking deeply. Andrea shared my passion for gardening. I wish we had known you all these years, Sarah told me as we washed dishes together after dinner. Dad used to get this look sometimes, like he was remembering something sad. I think he was thinking about you. The government handlers continued to monitor our interactions, always present, always listening. Their presence was a constant reminder that our reunion existed in the shadow of national security concerns, political calculations, and legal complications. How long will they be watching us? I asked David during a phone call nearly a year after our reunion. I don't know, he admitted. The case is still ongoing. There could be more hearings, possibly trials. So we just live like this, under surveillance, our time together controlled by strangers. It's better than not having any contact, he said softly. Isn't it? It was, of course. But the circumstances were far from ideal. The one unexpected bright spot in this complicated new reality was that David and I found a shared purpose. His whistleblowing about government surveillance and my work with missing persons dovetailed into a powerful advocacy partnership. Though we had to be careful about public appearances together, we began working behind the scenes on issues of privacy rights and support for families separated by government action. You spent 30 years searching for me, David said during one of our strategy sessions. There are others out there searching too for people who disappeared for similar reasons. Maybe we can help them. It wasn't the relationship I had imagined all those years I spent searching. It was more complex, more painful, more constrained by external forces. But it was real. My son was alive. He was back in my life. The truth I've learned is rarely simple or comfortable. Justice is imperfect. Reconciliation is ongoing rather than complete. Love persists through separation and change, but it also transforms into something different than what it might have been. On the 30th anniversary of David's disappearance, April 17, 2023, we went together to Lake Windermere Federal Marshals, keeping a discreet distance. I showed him the spot where I had released lanterns each year on his birthday. I could feel it sometimes, he said, looking out over the water. Your love reaching out across the distance. Even when I couldn't respond, it mattered that you never gave up. We stood together as the sun set, this son I had lost, and found both of us older and wearier than we should have been, both carrying the scars of choices made and paths not taken. But we stood together, and that was a miracle I had stopped believing was possible. If you're watching this and someone you love has disappeared, I won't offer easy platitudes. The road ahead may be long and painful, but I will say this: love persists. Truth has a way of surfacing even after decades of darkness. Hold on to hope, but also build a life that can contain both your search and your need to live in the present. Have you ever lost touch with someone important to you and then reconnected years later? How did it feel to rebuild that relationship? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Your support helps others find these stories of hope amid heartbreak. Thank you for listening to my journey.